This is Ilan Rubin from 9 Inch Nails and Angels and Airwaves, and you're listening to the Son of a Blitch podcast.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Son of a Blitch podcast. I'm your host, George Blitch. Today, I had a phenomenal conversation with a wonderful musician by the name of Ilan Rubin. You guys might know him as the drummer for 9 Inch Nails, Angels and Airwaves. He's also been the drummer before with Paramore, played with Beck, Danny Elfman, No Effects, Lost Prophets, Freak of Nature, so many different amazing bands. This guy was touring Warped Tour, the Vans Warped Tour, when he was in 8th grade. We talk about him, kind of his early years of music and how he kind of just started continuing to progress. He joined 9 Inch Nails at 20 years old. He's been playing with them for 16 years now. He was actually inducted as the youngest member ever into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And he was the youngest ever to perform at Woodstock, holds the Guinness Book of World Record for that. I think he was 11 years old, maybe 12. Anyway, we talk a little bit about his history in music and kind of, giving a little bit of background to his styles. We talk about him being a multi-instrumentalist and playing all sorts of different things. And we talk about how as a drummer, he learned to play by ear and then kind of built from there and was reading books and watching videos. And this kind of came full circle because now, today, he's releasing his very first drum instructional book, I should say, called Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere, How to Creatively Expand on Simplicity. And this is put together through Hudson Music, which has done so many different amazing books for those who are, familiar as taking lessons and such and reading music from these books and learning things. But what's really neat too, and it's different than I grew up, where now you're going in and you're getting like this ebook from Hudson Music, and there's a little play button there. So you can actually hit that play button and you can hear him, Ilan, performing that particular section of the book. He has like 40 different things that are recorded, or maybe even more, throughout 4 sections. One's just kind of like a warm up on the practice pad, some of the things he does before these shows, and then brings it onto the kit. And really, they're like a lot of basic blocks I think you can build from, right? Starting out simple, and then how you can take this thing on from the practice pad into doing a fill. And then you hear it, and it's like, oh, that's how you can incorporate this with the toms and this fill. And so it's just a really cool book all around. I really love how it was recorded. It sounds so good. It's very something that can, from the very beginner, can pick this up into someone who's kind of an expert level, and you're going to be able to learn something. So you guys, if you have any interest in drumming, if you're a drummer and you want to take things to the next level, go pick up a copy of Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere from Hudson Music. Ilan Rubin, thank you so much for joining me today. Appreciate you sharing your talents and teaching other people's and being a mentor to them as well as you are. And you guys go check out his YouTube page. Check out those live drumming clips, man. He's got some amazing stuff from all the bands he's played with. And there's also a lot of cool stuff about that he's going to be putting out, little shorts and reels and a little intro video to this book that kind of explain a little bit further. So do that. Follow me on Instagram. I'll have all the links below in the show notes. And you guys, thanks for tuning into the podcast. And without further ado, here is my interview with Ilan Rubin of 9 Inch Nails, Angels and Airwaves, as well as his own solo projects that he's done, New Regime, and now his own self-titled music under his name, which singles are coming out soon. So make sure you go and follow those pages as well. And thanks for tuning in, guys. Hope you guys enjoy this one. I surely did. Take care. Hey, Ilan, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Fantastic, man. You got a big week coming up on Friday. Your first book drops. I'm super excited to talk about that. Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere. But first, I want to give listeners a little bit of background on, your expertise level and how you got started in this musical scene. And if we can just kind of go back to the day you found that drum kit and your dad's drum kit in the garage, and maybe kind of, walk us through a little bit of your history there, and we'll go into the book in a bit.
Sure thing. So my dad was a drummer when he was in middle school, high school. And he held onto his drums. Now, he did the responsible thing and went to college and got his master's in business and provided for the family he created. But we had the drums in the garage. They were beautiful Ludwig 1968 Silver Sparkles, pretty much the Ginger Baker drum set, but one bass drum. And really, I don't think I would have noticed them had my brothers not noticed them first. They had started playing, and I'm the youngest of 3. So perhaps it was a bit of brotherly competition. Maybe I was just fascinated. I mean, this is almost pre-memory. I mean, I don't really remember life before being able to play, but something piqued my interest, and he noticed I had a semblance of rhythm, that I wasn't just making noise. And he taught me a little thing and then another little thing. And once I kind of understood the way it worked, meaning I can hear something and I can play it back, then the obsession truly started. And it was a matter of being able to listen to music that my dad was presenting to me and learning things that I enjoyed. And then it became the lifelong obsession that is still taking hold of me to this day.
Well, you started there playing with your brothers too, didn't you? With the Freak of Nature FON band, and that was with Danny and Aaron, right? Isn't that how you guys started touring around? So how old were you then?
That was their high school band. So I was 8 or 9 at the oldest when that started. 9 at the oldest. And it was an interesting experience because the age difference between Aaron and myself is 8 years. So being a 9-year-old and they're seniors in high school, basically. So that was that. But yeah, that seems like a lifetime or 3 ago. But yeah, that got me started in terms of playing live and whatnot. But yeah, I've probably blocked most of it out, to be honest with you. But good formative years.
Now, you also, of course, you have a Guinness Book of World Records. I don't know, maybe you have multiple, but I know that this one here, you guys were the opening band. Was that FON that played at Woodstock, or was it a different group that played? You guys opened up 99, right?
That was it. It was, what's it called? The band won some kind of, this is in the very early, I wouldn't even call it streaming, but just mp3.com, that kind of thing. And some kind of competition was won, and that was the prize. But, it sounds a little more exciting than it was. And I'm not saying it wasn't exciting at the time. It's just, you picture Woodstock as this colossal event with these 2 giant main stages, and they were opposite ends of this giant airfield. At least it's the way I remember it. And there was this sort of emerging artist stage in a hangar in between the two. So it was a big thing at the time, and I don't want you to feel awkward when I say this, but it's something that's baffling to me when it gets brought up, because I'm like, oh yeah, that happened. But yeah.
Well, I mean, I've gone to played many festivals myself, my band, and there's been times like, oh, you played that band, these big ones played, and I'm like, yeah, we were in that side tent over there behind the porta potties and stuff, and that's like kind of getting your first going. But that's really cool to like be able to say that you played it. Isn't that the one where all hell broke loose later?
Yes.
So you guys started all of that, apparently, huh?
Apparently, yeah. Nothing but bad luck.
Oh man, well that's pretty fun to be able to have these experiences of playing and going around. I know that you've played with so many bands since. I was just kind of curious as far as your trajectory of these groups. I know you obviously started playing with 9 Inch Nails in 2009. I think you auditioned in 08. And, after he saw you at, I think it was like the Reading Festival playing with another band. What was the other group that you played with that kind of got you in his eyes and in his thoughts for giving you a call when Josh left?
Well, I'll tell you what, that is a band that that took a turn for the absolute worst in a situation that ended the band, and a guy is serving many decades in prison. And fortunately, I was long gone before that happened. But the band was quite a stepping stone, because we were playing before 9 Inch Nails at Reading and Leeds in 2007. And a very dear friend of mine who was teching for 9 Inch Nails at the time recommended to Trent that he watch me play. And, having known Trent for 15 years now, I'm shocked that he actually did it, because that band certainly wouldn't have been his cup of tea. And quite frankly, wasn't mine either, but it was a great opportunity and led to a phenomenal opportunity. And there you have it.
Well, and then you've also played with Angels and Airwaves, and I mean,
Yes.
the list goes on. You've sat in with No Effects when you were doing the Vans Warped Tour, Beck, Danny Elfman, all these different groups, man. I mean, you played with some of the top tier up there, and
I have to say, very well researched. You're finding skeletons in corners that I didn't even know, I forgot were there. But yeah, and I joke, but yeah, I mean, Warped Tour was my sort of first proper touring experience, and that was the summer of 8th grade,
That
that
is,
was my first like 3 weeks consistently out. My parents were with me at the time, but yeah, I was already a touring musician by the time I had started high school. So funny enough, fast forwarding a little bit, the second band that I was in provided a lot of sort of life lessons and career lessons in particular, because that was an exciting opportunity. It was a band that had been signed to a major label, but dropped 7.5 months later. So that dose of reality kicked in quickly, and by the time I was 16, I already had my first sort of midlife crisis. And what am I going to do? I've already been playing music for half my life, and it's not panning out the way I thought. But yeah, I was touring so much that I had to check into homeschooling. I mean, the thing I'm probably most grateful for is how supportive my parents were and are to this day.
sure.
But they knew I had to pursue this path, that I had a talent that warranted me sort of leading a different life, but they insisted on me getting straight A's, and they wouldn't allow me to, for example, get a GED and test out of school. They're like, we will find you an accredited school for child actors or kids who basically already are on a career path in their early to mid teens, but you're going to do it that way or you're not going to do it. So they found that for me. I did it, and I was touring I mean, things are a bit of a blur, as I've already said numerous times, but between the ages of 14 and 16, I would say, gone on the road more than I was at home. Definitely between 15 and 16. And then from there, I felt like a seasoned veteran, and then 17, 18, and 19 touring fairly nonstop, and I joined Nine Inch Nails at 20. So that, as you can imagine, had a great sort of busy touring schedule, but it was also very piecemeal in a way. So Nine Inch Nails at the time, we haven't done this in a while, but Nine Inch Nails at the time would tour very consistently. There would be a couple of years off, 2 or 3 years off. And then, for example, 2013-14, that was the last sort of, I say this in quotes, but proper touring cycle where there were dates stretching out about a year and a half. Everything since then has kind of it's been great, but it's been 3 weeks here, a few weeks off, 3 weeks here, a few weeks off. And then before you know it, you've gotten into that hiatus period again. And that hiatus period is what led to me being able to join Angels and Airwaves, which was a fun opportunity. And they're very dear friends of mine, but that was a band in San Diego. We had mutual friends. Obviously, Tom, everybody knows who Tom is.
Mm-hmm.
And
he's kind of in the news again right now.
Yeah,
yes, all the drone stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it was, a San Diego mutual friend was like, Tom needs a drummer. Tom, this guy's you guys should talk. And then there you go. So that happened in about 2011 or 12. And yeah, it's very strange that as a musician who has pretty much based his entire life around music, I just see periods of my life in the context of tours and albums and whatnot. So I kind of see the way all those pieces fit in terms of what I've done, which is probably strange, but I'm sure it's not all that uncommon.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's periods of my life that I know that I can define them from these bands that I was into, or even when I was touring, of like what albums we were doing. Like I can understand that. And in that realm, I was just kind of thinking, in this kind of a personal question on that side, like, did you have some peers that were maybe going through, I can't say something exactly the same because they probably weren't doing the same thing as far as, 8th grade Warped Tour, but did you have some folks that had did you have a kind of a sounding board and some people that you had around you aside from your family that you could kind of relate to and work with? And because it might seem like you're kind of out on your own and on your boat at sea with your experience kind of growing up. And, I don't know if musical prodigy is something that, has been thrown around, but the idea of like you being a professional musician at a very young age. And I was just kind of curious what that was like for you.
Now, are you referring to people who may have given me life advice or career advice, that sort of thing, or just people I grew up with.
Well, I guess like the idea of like, yeah, your social circle around you, if you're out there touring all the time and you're doing that, and there might be bands that are older than you, and maybe on the Warped Tour there may be some younger groups and maybe some, I don't know if there was a lot of more teenage bands at that time age wise, but I was just
Yeah.
curious, did you find kind of a peer group that was around your age that you could relate to, or were you usually hanging out with people that were older than you by just default?
Up until very recently, I never had a peer group my age. And that was just because I took to music quickly. And I don't mean this to sound awful or pretentious or whatever you want to call it, arrogant, but I didn't have any kids at school who played music well. When they were just discovering that they liked music, I had already become a fairly good musician. And music's one of those things. I mean, it's like tennis, for example. If you play tennis with somebody who doesn't play well or isn't at your level and vice versa, it's not fun for the other person.
Sure.
And music is one of those things. People think, jamming is fun. And it can be if everyone's good and enjoying themselves or if everyone's in the same place. But if you have a really good player here and the drummer can't keep up or vice versa, and you have a terrible, whatever it may be, it's just not fun unless everyone is generally at the same place. And I didn't have that. Now, in terms of other people along the way, now that I think about it, it's funny because you always meet the one person or the select few who have a little more experience than you do. And then you kind of match their experience. And then you meet the person who's got more experience than you now. And it kind of always goes up. So it's funny. You, for example, your local band, you're just trying to get shows. Then you start getting shows. Then you, for example, join another band. And this band's actually toured before. And then this band's toured, but people actually go to the shows. And then it kind of just builds and builds and builds. And it continues that way once you're at the professional level, because obviously, just like anything, there's a huge variety of successes out there. And I mean, fortunately, I feel like at 20 years old, I joined a legendary band, and that was great. And it was by far the best thing that I had done. But, the band that I was with before was a colossal stepping stone for me, aside from the more local bands or the sort of domestic touring acts, that kind of thing. So you're always sort of leveling up. And once you get to a certain level, you kind of just make lateral moves, I suppose.
Well, and when you're talking about like that idea of, and I guess we'll throw a name on it, like mentorship, like were there some people who were significant that you could name out that you were able to rise to that level of that mentorship and work, and kind of, because I believe in this kind of will tie into the book there too, because a lot of folks, they're starting to play by ear, whether it's music and in drums. Like I know that I played and then I ended up going and taking some lessons, and there's some drum books and stuff that I would look at and everything, but it kind of that trajectory is a little bit different for everybody, but having some, mentors or some people you can look up to in that space. And, I don't know if this was part of your relationship that was built with Tom, but I believe that there was a time that you and Travis Barker got together and that he did some work. I thought I read something somewhere about that, but I was curious about if there's people that were, that you might name off that, helped you in whatever capacity it was, and maybe how you might feel about what it is to have a mentor, and are you doing any mentoring now? So I know it's a lot of different questions, so run with it as you wish.
Well, I wouldn't say a mentor per se. I mean, for example, you mentioned Travis, and I can get that one out of the way quickly, but this was even before this. This was, I think, Warped Tour 2000. Okay, so this was we had done a week on it. This was the summer or two before my first 3-week tour or whatnot. But somebody who worked with Blink at the time saw me play and was impressed that he saw an 11-year-old kid playing the drums well, or at least, well for an 11-year-old. Saw two adults in the crowd and put it together. They were my parents. Basically said, hey, I work with Blink. Would your son be interested in taking lessons from their drummer? He gives drum lessons and he's local. So that's literally how that happened. And of course, it was a great opportunity. He was unique in the sense that he was a trained musician playing in music that does not require training, generally pop punk, right? And that was that. But, Travis and I never really had a real kind of buddy-buddy relationship, because you have to think, 11, 12, 13 years old, a guy in his mid-20s, what's that relationship going to be beyond, all right, here's your drum lesson for the hour? I mean, we got along well. I thought he was a very nice guy, and we would bump into each other every few years. And then, funny enough, I saw him the most I had ever seen him once I joined Angels and Airwaves, because Angels at that time, Blink had gotten back together either for the first or the second time. I don't know. It's hard to keep track of when a band breaks up that much, but I joke, but kind of.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then you kind of get into this odd place where, okay, both adults at this point, but I've known the guy since I was 11 years old. So it's a very sort of odd thing, but that was purely nothing career. That was just, okay, we're going to read notation. We're going to go through rudiments. We're going to go through stuff with the drum set. And that was that. But it was a very good experience. Now, I can't really say I had any mentorship in terms of music career stuff, just because, and I could be misspeaking. Nothing's coming to mind right now. And the reason why I'm saying this is because I always felt sort of disappointed up until Nine Inch Nails. Now I don't mean to sound that I was disappointed because, I'm just not touring as well as I'd like and I'm a 16-year-old. That's not what I mean. It's just I always felt like I learned more what not to do with the people I was playing with. And that is just as valuable.
It's probably what got you to where you were at that point.
When I finally, when I joined Nine Inch Nails, I felt like finally I'm in a band with real musicians who take this seriously, and that's why they're so good live. Being in a room with Trent and seeing the way he conducted rehearsals and knew that he expected everyone to be on their game, and everyone was there prepared and had their notebooks and was figuring out, okay, we got to work on this. We got to fix that. I'll get to this some other time. This will be prepared before tomorrow's rehearsal. It's just very, very regimented. And I don't mean that in a way that feels dry. It was just structured is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't just dicking around for a couple of hours and why don't we get out of here? It's that I had done for 12 years or whatever. And I always felt that even climbing that ladder, like I said, you get to the kind of next thing that's a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger. I just felt that anybody I had worked with who had a semblance of success took it for granted and had a piss poor work ethic, which infuriated me personally. I hate when people are unappreciative. So Nine Inch Nails was, although it was by far the biggest thing I had done, there was a huge level of comfort there because there was an expectation and an appreciation. This is the first guy. It's funny. The most successful guy, I'm speaking of Trent here, of course, but the most successful guy I'd ever played with was the most appreciative of my skills. He wasn't threatened by me in any way. A lot of people, as I was growing up, were threatened by me, especially as a guy who could play the drums well, but could also play guitar and bass and piano and whatnot. He was like, okay, if you're not playing drums, I need you to play piano on this. And that was awesome. And that's one of the things that has remained so unique about the Nine Inch Nails experience for me is that, well, yes, it's primarily drumming. I love the fact that I get off the drums and play bass on a few songs or piano in between sections of a song or whatever it may be. It's a lot of fun and the challenge is there. But like I said, the appreciation in my abilities as opposed to being threatened by them, that was the first time. And it's kind of like the people who are secure in themselves in that way are appreciative in others. A lot of insecure people out there.
Oh yeah. Especially in bands. I mean, especially if you're multi-talented, they're like, oh man, he might take my spot if there's, but you had it locked down there. Well, you talk about playing other instruments, and obviously you've had some solo records and you've kind of had it under two different names. You had the New Regime and then you had it under your own name too. And I was, want to dive into that because you play all the instruments and on all these tracks. And I'm not sure if you had any guests come in for anything, but I mean, it's been your stuff there that you've written. And I was curious, is this something that you would do in your own home studio? Would you go out and have anybody else record it and kind of help you with that? Or is this kind of your baby from, cradle to grave on these?
It is entirely me. Every note that you hear is me. In fact, my oldest brother, Aaron, who engineered, mixed, and co-produced all that stuff, and then went on to do the Angels stuff when I joined, and he's kind of become Tom's right-hand man in the studio for everything that he does. But he obviously, without him, I wouldn't have been able to do it, because he had a curiosity and an interest in recording. I just wanted to play and write. So for him, it was fun. And we had played in bands together, but I feel like there are two types of musicians: the ones who have a tech savviness and those who couldn't care less. And he really got into that. And I feel like this was probably at the time where digital multi-track recorders were kind of being replaced by smaller audio interfaces, and still very primitive, but I'm talking, how familiar are you with this stuff?
Oh yeah, no, I remember when I got my first 828, and it was just mind-boggling to be able to have something like that. And I think I was like 2001, but going into studios where you had these massive multi-tracks, and now you can fit everything in your back pocket. For those who are listening that might not understand exactly what we're talking about, audio interface, being able to plug something in, go into your computer, record there. Digitally, it used to not be that way. You used to have to record on tapes, tracks, DATs. It goes back.
So, and I had experience recording on that stuff as a drummer, but never for my own sort of creative output. But my dad, I still remember the model number, but my dad got him this Yamaha recorder called the AW4416 and had a built-in CD drive. But I think that's where he kind of at least learned the very basics of signal flow and getting a recorded signal down. But as I said, this was at a time when those things were becoming phased out, and you can get a Digio 1 or Digio 2, and you can have Pro Tools on your computer. And as that progressed, and I thought, okay, I play these instruments. I'm going to force myself to sing so that I don't have to depend on anybody. And he said, okay, well, if you buy a couple of pieces of gear, I can record it for you. So we kind of had a hodgepodge of, we didn't use that recorder as a recorder, but we could use the preamps in it to run into Pro Tools. And at the time, I bought two Vintech X73s, or like Neve 1073 clones, and two distressors. And these are pieces of gear we have to this day, but I bought these in maybe 07 or 08, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And my first 10 songs that I recorded are the first New Regime album called Coup. And things progressed from there, and we both got better. He as a engineer, mixer, me as a writer, singer, so on and so forth. But everything you hear there throughout the New Regime catalog is all me. In fact, the one time Aaron tried to record a tambourine because he's like, I think this would be good here. I'm like, it is, but I'm going to re-record it just because it's some weird OCD thing.
Yeah, well, if you've done 99.9%, you got to do that 0.1.
I'm doing exactly.
That 3 tambourine hit, that's got to be me, man.
It's got to be me. Only I can hit the tambourine that way. No, but yeah, and I have to say, very proud of all of the New Regime stuff. The reason why I started releasing music under my own name fairly recently, this was in the pandemic, was because, first of all, the pandemic obviously knocked everybody down many pegs, especially touring musicians. And so much of my life had been touring as a drummer. And then in the sort of off season, so to speak, that's when I would have time to write and record the New Regime stuff. So I feel like I was never able to give the New Regime the time that it deserved, even though I tried and I toured a lot and I put a lot into it. I felt like I hadn't achieved with it what I had wanted to in the 10 or so years it had been around at the time, which was shocking to me. And I'm like, is this considered old now? Is it not old? It's not where I want it to be. So basically when the pandemic hit, I was on tour with the New Regime. I had just put out my last album called Heart, Mind, Body, and Soul. And we were supporting Silver Sun Pickups at the time. and pulled up to a venue and realized that nobody was loading in. And it's like, well, the country's shutting down. Everyone go home, and maybe we'll be back by July. This was how early on that was. But in realizing that it wasn't going to be a couple of weeks and that nobody actually knew what they were talking about, I had a couple of decisions to make. I just had this gut feeling of like, okay, if this is 1 year, let alone 2 or more, I didn't want to spend all that time doing nothing, so to speak, just to pick up where I left off before COVID. So I thought, okay, that's it for the new regime. I'm obviously still going to write and record my own music, but doing it under my own name felt like a fresh start. And the music is somewhat different, even though it's still me. But I also had this epiphany because a couple of years, or the year before the pandemic, the new regime was supporting Angels and Airwaves. And I would play our 45-minute set or whatever it was, and I would go take off my jacket and get back on stage 20 minutes later to play an Angel set. And I try to be very conscious about not getting spoiled, right? So just because I'm in the headlining band who people are actually there to see doesn't mean I should conduct myself as the support act any differently. So I would finish the Angels set and go to the new regime merch booth and hang around there. And the amount of people who either said to me, you look like the singer in the new regime, or you look like the drummer in Angels and Airwaves, I thought, oh my God, this is a disconnect that I did not think could be this bad. And I don't blame the people for that, but
Right.
I just thought there's a disservice I've been doing to myself here for 10 years or whatever it was. So all of these experiences and emotions at the time led me to say, okay, I'm going to do a fresh start, and there's going to be no mystery as to what's going on here. And I suppose I enjoyed the sort of cloak of a band. I mean, for example, Nine Inch Nails was I wouldn't say an inspiration at the time in terms of, yes, Nine Inch Nails may have started more of a band, but everybody knows that Nine Inch Nails is Trent Reznor.
Right.
That resonated with me quite a bit. And I liked presenting it as a band rather than here's me solo. But after having done it for quite a while and having been comfortable with it, I thought, okay, I've got nothing to hide here, and it's me.
Well, and do you have plans to have any releases here in the near future? Is there some new music that's on the way? I know you've done some albums and you got some, singles you put out. What's on the horizon there?
So I'll tell you what, I literally have the session up right now for a song that I'm working on, but I will have 3 songs that are unreleased, or in the can, ready to go, I should say. And one of the things that I did with releasing under my own name is, even though I am an album lover, and that's how I grew up taking in music, I kind of like this idea of releasing one song at a time, and nothing has to make sense in comparison to what comes before or after it. And I did enjoy that, but I feel like once these 3 songs are out, I will have done 12 of these singles, and I do kind of miss the longer format. Everything has its pros and cons because it's just as much effort spread over quite a lengthy amount of time. And the thing that I hated is that I would work and spend so much time and attention to an album, and then once it's out, it's old news the following week. And I was sick of feeling that. But at this point, there's so much strategy that has to be thought of in terms of rolling material out to avoid what I just said, that there's just a lot of preparation that needs to take place. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as, here's my new album, I hope you enjoy it, because 8 billion other people are doing the exact same thing. There's such a sad statistic. I read it the other day saying that more music comes out in one day than the entirety of 1989.
What?
Yeah. And on the one hand, you could think, oh, that's great, everyone can do it. But, not everyone's good at what they do.
Yeah, not everyone should. Yeah.
You're fighting to get through the same thing. Now, that is what it is. And I'm not saying any of that should change, but it's a difficult space to navigate, especially if you're not one of the bigger bands.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, is your goal to hopefully get some tracks out there and then tour? And then if so, what does that look like for all the people who would need to fill in those replacements of those sounds? Do you have kind of like a group that becomes the backing band that you've worked with, or that they're always like, yeah, give me a call, I'm ready to do this? Or how does that look like for you as far as moving that on the road?
I mean, I don't have anybody waiting for me for that call, but I do have a good stable of talented friends who I could call, who would hopefully be interested in this time. And I would love to do it. It's just, once again, I can't seem to avoid the conundrum of, and this is, of course, a good problem to have, but I've got my life as a drummer and I've got my life as a solo artist, and I'm not necessarily in complete control of either in terms of scheduling. So everything becomes this sort of, I feel like a kid with a shapelet. You're trying to get everything to fit into the right shape, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You got to figure out, how am I going to do everything that I want to do? And then I don't know if it's just getting a little bit older, but I fully subscribe to this phenomena that time becomes faster.
It does.
And it vanishes, and I understand why, but it is terrifying. I'm thoroughly depressed that that 2025 is around the corner.
Yeah, well, it's like the halftime theory of technology, right? The next major advancement's half the time through. I feel like as my kids are getting older, I'm like, wait, how did this happen? And I mean, you've now also moving forward with another project here, which might even bring the timeline even faster. You're an author now, man. On Friday, you're dropping your debut book here, and I'd love for you to talk to me a little bit about that. It's 184 pages, spiral bound, and it has audio examples. I mean, it's a really cool concept. It's different than when I grew up and you get a book and you just look at it, and now you can be able to listen to something and get the really good reference on what it should sound like. And then obviously it's kind of like building blocks that people can go with from that. And I was just curious, how did this come about? Is this something that you've had in mind for a little while? I know that you love reading, that you're an intellectual. So the idea of you, is that throwing out loosely? I read it in an article, but the idea that you would you kind of had a
I would love to be referred to as an intellectual. That's great.
Yes, there you go. You're like, hey, everyone, listen. What he's
well, I'll tell you what, I had always, and when I say always, I mean going back 20 years at least, wanted to eventually put out a drum book. And there were many aborted phases of me starting to get notes on paper, and then I would get distracted by something else that I was doing, and then I'll do it next year, or it'd be really great if I put it around this time because I'm doing that, and they could sort of cross-pollinate in terms of marketing and blah 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 blah. And for one reason or another, it never happened. And then I got to a point where I'm like, holy shit, I'm 35. And my wife was pregnant. So I thought, okay, my time is going to take a big hit here. And time is, aside from my family, of course, is the most precious thing to me.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, that's it. I'm 35. I need to have this book done, written, and it needs to be put out by next year. And if I don't do this, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to.
Sure.
And I sat down and I did it. And it was quite an undertaking, but it was a very satisfying experience that I'm very proud of. And I am a lover of books, not just music books. I love books. I don't think there's anything better looking than a bookshelf full of books. And I love to read. I love to learn, whether it be, like I said, non-music, music related. And I did grow up, as far as music books were concerned, drum books, learning a lot from them because I am a largely self-taught musician. I mean, I'm entirely self-taught as a guitar player, bass player, pianist. Drumming, I started somewhat self-taught. Obviously, my dad got me started, and he took me as far as he could. I learned a ton by myself, and then I started getting teachers who taught me notation and so on and so forth. But everything that I picked up, I would love getting a book. And when it clicked that I could teach myself whatever I wanted, as long as I have a book that would show me how to do it. that was a great experience. And I didn't realize that it was fairly atypical at the time. Young people don't generally like books. A lot of old people don't like books either. But I always loved them. And so it was something that I wanted to do. And when I finally got around to doing it, there are many hurdles. And I'm sure, you know all about this. You've put out books yourself. Who's going to publish it? Does anybody want to publish it? How's this going to work? And you can really get in your own way rather than just getting everything down on paper or on the computer. In my instance, I actually wrote the entire thing by hand and then input it into a computer. And I kind of treated that as a stage of editing.
Yeah.
And then I sent all that to the eventual publisher, which was Hudson Music. And that was a great sort of full circle moment for me because I grew up having a lot of the stuff that they published and a lot of the sort of drum VHS tapes that they put out and the sort of things you'd see behind the register at Guitar Center. I had a lot of those growing up. So a friend of mine said, hey, you should talk to, it may have even been my manager. She said, hey, you should talk to Mark Giuliani. He's got a book. I'm like, you're right, he does. And got in touch with him. Lovely guy. We had met a few times in the past, but had many mutual friends. He's like, let me put you in touch with my guy. And this was a guy named Joe Bergamini at Hudson Music. And he was interested. And once you kind of have that enthusiasm behind you and you've made the commitment, there's no turning back. And I liked that pressure. But the undertaking was quite thorough. I did not think in any way, shape, or form would this book be over 100 pages, let alone 184. And what's funny is that, at least in my scenario of kind of pitching this idea, I wrote a sample chapter or a sample section and a mock table of contents. And the guys at Hudson looked at it and they're like, look, all this seems really good, but you have at least 2 books worth of stuff here, maybe 3. So why don't you just turn the first 4 chapters into this book and then we'll see what goes on beyond that. And I said, okay, great. That'll make it a whole hell of a lot easier. And it didn't, because it really was a lot of material. So I turned those 4 chapters into 4 sections that were then subdivided into a total of 40 chapters. And there you have it. So the book's called Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere. And that was a sort of phrase from a friend I've had for a long time, a great drummer. Actually, his name is Mike Fasano, really good friend. Great drum tech great drum tech and great drummer, but we met working together when I was about 13, 14. He came in and got the drum sounds for the album, and he did this for so many great drum recordings. And I suppose he could fill that sort of mentorship role because my parents and I would ask him, okay, how do we get to the next level? How does he do more sessions? And he would always say, hey, you're young, man. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing what you're doing. You got to start somewhere to go somewhere. And when I was smashing my head against the desk, trying to come up with a title for the book, somehow that just came back to me and I used it. And I was like, I owe you. I've got a debt of gratitude. He's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, here's what I named my book. And obviously that was a long time running, but there you have it. And pardon me if I've been rambling too long, but the point of Start Somewhere to Go Somewhere is that the book is really based around being able to milk a lot from fairly simple ideas, because everything comes from something simpler. And not everything needs to be complicated. What's most important is what you can get out of anything. Obviously, in the instance of drums, okay, here's a rudiment. What can you actually do with it other than playing it on a snare drum or a practice pad? You can use it for fills. You can use it for solo material. But here are ways in which the applicability of them is very apparent. So it's also an insight into the way I think, okay? Now, for whatever that's worth, I will take something, I will become comfortable with it, and I'll go, okay, what if I add a note here? Or what if I move this note over there? Now it becomes something a little more interesting. Okay, now I'm comfortable with that. How do I make that more interesting? And you kind of displace notes or distribute notes across different drums, and you come up with these things that all sound very different, but are based upon this very simple building block. And I hope that that shows people when they stumble across something simple where they're not thinking, okay, this is simple. They think, what can I do with this? Or what can I make out of this? And I think that's a very important way to look at things, especially musically, because complexity does not always bring something fun to the table.
Sometimes you have to have that KISS method, right? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah,
sometimes
exactly.
But you can strip that down. You can build from that, and that's where I like you talk about, like in section 1, like at the practice pad. It's things that you kind of talk about that you even do like while you're warming up for shows, right? And it's some things to kind of get you warmed up. Then you can take it to at the drums. And when you're listening to these audio samples that come with the ebook, or you can, when you go to Hudson and you purchase this, you can go ahead and you can download these audio clips. And so you're getting an example of what it sounds like in a slower format, and then you have it later on as sped up. And there's also something, it's like not just on the snare. It's like, okay, hey, that's how you can incorporate, the toms in this sound. And I love that idea when you talk about like building blocks. That's what it really feels like. There's things that you progress, and you have so many different things, and then the sticking. And I have to just mention this real quick too, because you're an open-handed drummer, right? Like you had started out. And if you wouldn't mind, just give me a little 1-minute version of that, and then how it is that you prepared this book, where it's not just in that method. It can be all around, however you want to do your sticking. But if you wouldn't mind just mentioning that too, because I think it's a fascinating way. When I first saw you playing, and then moving on to the other side of the kit, I was like, wait, what's happening here? So,
Well, thanks. So it was a very naive discovery that my left hand was closer to the hi-hat. It's that simple. And my dad taught me the way he knew how to play, which was right hand on the hi-hat over your hand that's hitting the snare drum. And when he left me to practice something, which is what he would do, he'd say, okay, work on that and come get me when you think you got it. And in that moment, I was like, this doesn't make any sense. It's silly. I could hit my hand by mistake. Why would I do that? This is closer and my hands are not in the way of each other. And that was that. I came in to the house. I said, all right, Dad, I got it. Come listen to it. I played the beat, and he looked at it, or at me, and was seemingly confused because it sounded right, but it didn't look right. And I have no problem saying it didn't look right, because when I see open-handed drummers, I think that doesn't look right.
Yeah. Is he okay?
But but that's same with left-handed drummers. That one's even weirder. I can't look at them. What's funny is that I got to send a book to Dom Howard from Muse, who's a good friend of mine. He's the only proper lefty drummer that I know. So hopefully it works out for him. But the discovery of playing open-handed, but already having sort of started right-handed, I had a ride cymbal to my right. I had a crash ride to my left. Some things came to me very naturally right-handed. Most things came to me more naturally left-handed or open-handed. And again, I should say, the only things I do left-handed are hit the hi-hat and write. And I write very terribly. It is completely illegible. But, and I can blame that on being left-handed in that regard. But I thought, okay, well, I kind of need to be able to do most things both ways. It's not something I'm obsessive about, but generally when I'm on the hi-hat, I'm playing with my left. When I'm on the right, I move to my right. And I thought, okay, this is another through line to the book that I think could be very useful. It could be a challenge to people who want to enhance their coordination or their strength on the weaker side. Or it could be a book for people who do play like me, and I've stumbled across a couple, and where they go, I play open-handed, but I also kind of play right-handed. I'm like, well, this is perfect. So I think it ticks a lot of boxes in terms of who it's good for. And skill level, genre, I think all these things are irrelevant to this book, because there's nothing in there that's, astronomically difficult, right? And there are things in there that are quite simple, but that sort of linear trajectory of slightly becoming more interesting and more syncopated and slightly more difficult, I think would pertain to a very wide range of drummers.
I think so, man. You kind of talk about different, influences and interviews you've talked about of, styles of music, but this is something that it's like, again, it's that basic block, right? first time drummer can pick this up. Somebody who's very experienced can pick this up, and they're going to be able to have really cool practice things. Maybe they've done them before, maybe they haven't, but as far as the application thereof, it can go into any genre. I really and I think coming back from when I was growing up, I'm 45 now, and we didn't have the internet to where you could just go and click play when I was 11 years old learning. It's like, and hear how it would sound. You could maybe go get a VHS tape, but looking at drum notation. And I love the idea that now it's like I could read this in your book. I could go over there and play and be like, oh, okay, that's how that sounds to me. If I'm stumbling up on something or I'm trying to do some inverted paradiddle and something is just different for me, like, okay, but I love the idea that someone, and especially those who may read or not be able to read music as well, but they can hear it well. So many different people. I can pick that song out, I can figure out that part, but they might not be able to read music or vice versa. I love that you have examples of both. I feel it applies to everybody, and I'm really excited for this to come out. This podcast will air on Friday. So today, guys, you can go and check that out. It's going to be over at Hudson Music. And I highly suggest you go and pick it up. I know that there's some autographed copies there too. So there are like 25 left or so.
It could be. I haven't checked, to be honest with you, but I will say, so in terms of the recorded audio, it is me playing. There are about 50 or so exercises that have the audio. Now, if you get the book in a physical copy, there's a download link there and you'll get your files, however that works. But Hudson also has a great app, and it's kind of like their iBooks where you can go in and buy the books right then and there. But if you get the digital version of the book, you have the play button right in the book and you can listen to that. So really the only barrier to entry is to be able to read. And it's not very complex stuff in terms of the reading. It's not like there isn't a single groove in the book. So everything is fairly linear. It's really an exploration on expanding upon rudiments at the drum set, really, and what can be done with them. So everything is very linear. And what I mean by that in a musical context is that rarely do two things hit at once. So you can really just follow these phrases and patterns, and even if it's slow, you can do it.
Yep. Slow is smooth is fast, right? There, you can build it from there.
Yeah.
Well, man, I'm really excited for you. I think this is a great book. It's been cool to check it out. I got the e-version, and being able to hit that play button is really cool. So everyone, I kind of suggest that, as well as having a physical copy that you can kind of take with you too, and you're maybe unplugged from the world and you're in your studio or whatever, practicing. And just kind of, curious of where people can go to, like, not only just, pick this up at Hudson Music, but to follow your journey and maybe what's coming next, when your next album is going to be dropping, what tour is going to be upcoming. If you can go ahead and maybe kind of give your socials, websites that you have that you'd like to go ahead and, plug for the listeners.
Well, fortunately, all of my social media stuff is just my name, Ilan Rubin, ILAN. RUBIN. I am most active on Instagram. I am trying to do that better because it is 2024. Not for long, but it is an important part of things. So that I've actually made an attempt to be a bit more active in that regard. But yeah, I think Instagram is a good place. And YouTube is something that I have kind of done on and off, just depending on the time, of course. But for example, I do have a video where I talk about the book a little more in depth, but some really fun drum camp stuff from Nine Inch Nails tours and Angels and Airwaves tours, some of my own music stuff where I kind of go into deep dives into the actual Pro Tool sessions of songs that I've released in the last couple of years. But yeah, fun stuff that I'm trying to keep up with. But between all of that and then creating the stuff to begin with, and it's quite an undertaking, but I'm trying to make time, bring it out of thin air, just summon it
and slow it down too, right?
So that would be great.
When you figure out that formula, share it with me. I would love to know. Well, and that kind of brings me to my final question there is, I know obviously you're married, you have a kiddo that it's, fairly young, and you being where you're at, and you ticked off one of those boxes that, I think that any person who really pursues music and loves touring and everything, and that's to, maybe one day get the, the shining accolades of being in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, right? It's a dream in there too. And you were the youngest ever to be inducted. And I know that you're still a young man as far as that's concerned. I consider myself one too, right? We'll consider that, right? And,
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yes. Yes. I see the young whippersnappers that are, but we're still in that, maybe even haven't hit our prime yet, but the idea that the idea of legacy, and I think it changes for a lot of people too when they have kids and what they think about and what they want to leave behind as far as on a professional and on a personal setting. And I was just curious, do you think much about that? Is that an idea that is, tied into what you do? Because I know that you're so professional about so many things that you enter. I don't think you ever half-ass anything from what it seems like what you get involved in. And I was curious, what do you think about as that imprint that you leave behind when each of those projects are done, or at the very end of your life and looking back on those things? What does that kind of idea of legacy look like to you?
That is a very good, deep, and profound question. Now, I do think it's a tough one to answer because, I mean, when you think about legacy as an idea, I feel like it's hard to answer in a way that doesn't sound pretentious or arrogant. Okay. Now,
I get that. Yep.
Now, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be remembered, especially, in a great way. Right. Now, I suppose all I can say in doing my best to not sound like that, I would love to leave a legacy behind where people appreciate me the way I appreciate my heroes. Now, the thing that's odd to say about that is that my heroes are absolute legends. I would love it if people looked at me the way they looked at, the Beatles and Led Zeppelin and Queen, but that doesn't exist anymore, right? And it's a very, the world is constantly changing, okay? And it changed tremendously from when my heroes were around, and it's changed tremendously in the last 10 years. So what legacy is and what it can be, I have no idea, because I perhaps could be on the cusp of that generation, so to speak, that goes, oh, the music kids are listening to these days is never going to stick around. I genuinely feel that way about a lot of it, but how the hell could I know? I could be colossally wrong, and I probably will be, right? People have said that about actual greatness. So maybe there's just a big disconnect in taste there. Who knows? Let's chalk it up to that. Yeah, I just hope a good amount of people appreciate what I do, and hopefully I've done something worth appreciating. Now, in the present, I feel like, I don't want to say my focus is shifted because it's all tied into one another. But as you said, being a dad, I also want to accomplish everything that I want to accomplish for his sake, because I want to be able to give him everything that he needs to pursue what he wants to pursue and to be able to succeed. I don't want to impede anything that he may want to do. Now, I feel like I've got some time right now. He can't even talk yet. But I feel a giant ticking clock behind me at all times, and it's now ticking faster.
Yeah. No, it's a fuel, I think, too. When you look at that in your life, too, it's like, especially I see a lot of my friends that, their parents, they're losing their parents. And then it's all of a sudden they're the elder of the family. And I think that time keeps going quicker. But I think a lot of, about what it is that you are doing, the impact, the imprint you're leaving on the world, and hopefully that your name is and is remembered, and that your work is remembered, and your discography is huge. I know that there's always going to be the ability to go, and especially now, the ability to just pick up your phone and play and check it out. I've seen you play live. It's really. It's fun that all these things can get recorded in that way with digital world, and as far as video and audio, because those things will live forever. I highly suggest people go check out your YouTube page and make sure you keen in on some of those live videos, because those are super fun.
Thank you.
The Perfect Drug. Oh my gosh, that rendition that was recorded there is phenomenal, man. I was always wondering
Thank
how that
you.
was going to be played live. I know Chris, and Josh have seen those guys play, but this one is just a great one. So that's a video I'd say start with. Really good one. But listen, man,
Thank you.
I really appreciate you coming on today, and I wish you all the best of luck with this book. Look forward to hopping on again sometime when volume 2 comes out, and hopefully next time you're
All
on a
right.
tour, saying hello in person sometime. But I really appreciate you coming on today, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers,
My
man. You
pleasure.
take care.
You too.